Mr. Chair, is the audio working? We can't hear anything on Zoom.
Can you hear us now?
Oh, I hear something. Well, not anymore.
Are we in business, Tom?
Can you still hear us?
It's very faint. It's not very
Okay.
good.
Jared, do you hear us okay?
Yes, sir.
Yay. Tony? It says it's
That was good. I could hear Jarrett, Joseph.
Yeah, I think people in Zoom are pretty loud, but y'all are super quiet.
I can hear you, Miranda, now. It's good.
okay. All right, let's try this again. This is the Meridian Transportation Commission meeting of November the 1st, 2021. It is 3:47 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. First order of business is the roll call. Miranda, if you don't mind, please.
Mr. Ballard,
Present.
Mr. Shoemaker,
Here.
Mr. Lancaster,
Present.
Mr. Steed,
Here.
Mr. Hopkins,
Here.
Mr. Lewis,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Leclerc,
Here.
Mr. Leckie,
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh. Councilman Cavanagh is present. I believe he left the room. Mr. Price,
Here.
that's the roll.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And I have one change that I would like to make without objection, is to pull item 8 under new business. We have discussion going on between ACHD and the city attorney's office regarding some interpretation of some of that. So rather than confuse us by talking about it, I propose that we pull it and we'll have it again next month. Any problems? Okay, item 8 is pulled.
No objection.
Any other changes in the agenda? Okay, approval of the minutes of October the 4th. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the agenda as amended by you.
Second.
I have one item, Miranda, on the October 4 meeting minutes. Emma?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're back. Okay, you're doing a motion to approve. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm not used to doing motions on those, but that's fine. We have a motion and a second to change the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Amen. Hey,
Who was the second, Mr. Chair?
Okay, thank you. Now, the minutes of October 4. Anyone have anything?
Mr. Chairman, I do on the first page. So on the roll call, actually, I was not in attendance in October, and it looks like a couple of the commissioners that were in attendance via Zoom are marked as absent. So
I think Tom Leclerc was at the last meeting.
I was.
Tom was in attendance.
I was as well.
Mr. Shoemaker was in attendance. Mr. Lancaster was not, and Sergeant Frazier was not with us.
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
that's right.
Mr. Chairman, I was not here also, so I need to be a big 0.
Okay. Got those, Miranda? Okay. Mr. Lancaster, anything else?
Nope, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have something at the bottom of the third page of that item under staff communications, in the paragraph talking about Compass School. Both myself and Councilmember Cavanagh spoke about our knowledge of that situation, mine from having gone over there and watched it. I think I said 4 times, at different two mornings and 2 afternoons, and then is the fact that he takes a child over there, or occasionally does. He's got a child attending there. I'm not sure either one of us said anything remarkably wonderful, but we did comment on it. That should be in the minutes, please. That's all I have. Anyone else with anything on the minutes of October 4? Mr. Baird? Yes, sir.
May I ask a question of legal counsel?
Mr. Baird.
Question about outside or observations made outside of this meeting. I recall when I first, and I'm not being critical, because I gather information that's to our benefit, but where is the line about one of us observing and then bringing those observations or comments about observations to the meeting, and the technicality of having that part of the record, I guess.
I can hear you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Any other comments on the minutes? Chair would entertain a motion for approval as amended.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Lewis and
Mr. Hopkins.
Yeah, Miranda told me she had trouble distinguishing over here who's motioning and seconding, and apparently so do I. I must be on my bad ear. So if y'all don't mind, if you'd state your name when you make a motion or a second, I think it would help both of us. Thank you very much. I'm not always looking at you to see who's speaking. It's a motion, and did we have a second?
Second by Mr.
Second
Ballard.
by Mr. Ballard. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, the next item of business, I do have one other change to the agenda, but it's only to move an item up. New Lieutenant Frazier has been able to attend this afternoon's meeting in order to introduce our new liaison to the police department. And in order to not tie up Lieutenant Frazier in case he needs to go to a shift change or something, I'd like to try to go ahead, if it's okay with everybody, and let him introduce our new member. Is that okay? Lieutenant Frazier, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you. It's been a while since we've all spoke. Sergeant Dance and I wanted to be here last month, but things got a little busy that afternoon in particular. So October 1st, I was promoted to lieutenant, moved away from the traffic team. Sergeant Dance took my place. So I'm just here to welcome him to the Transportation Commission. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. I'm sure we'll meet again. I'm not far, but thank you for your time and the projects we've worked on, and I'll let Justin introduce himself.
Please.
Thank you. I'm Justin Dance. I've been with the Meridian Police Department for just over 10 years now. And I started my career in Eastern Idaho, over in the Blackfoot area. I was with the Bingham County Sheriff's Office for about 6 years prior to moving back over here. This is where I grew up, the Treasure Valley. I went to school in Middleton. So this is kind of where my family is and where I want to come back to work. For the last 4 years, I've been assigned as a patrol supervisor, a patrol sergeant, just working various shifts and have a variety of assignments within the department, instructor assignments and teaching assignments. But I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a new opportunity for me to learn something kind of outside my wheelhouse. So I'm excited to be here. I'm happy to take on the challenge, and I look forward to working.
We're excited to have you. Glad to have you. Thank you very much. Any questions for the sergeant? Lieutenant, we would all like to thank you for your time, your effort, your patience with us, maybe some tolerance too. Not everything that we do in here ends up in changing the world, but we do our best to plow the ground and try to get something to grow. So you've been a part of that, and we do appreciate it. Wish you well in your new assignment and responsibilities, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine.
Likewise, Lieutenant, congratulations, Sergeant Dance. He left some big shoes for you.
Yeah, I tell him that all the time. Haley.
No, welcome aboard. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Lieutenant, if you need to go get some other work done, thanks. If you don't, we'd love to have you stay with us. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Transportation Projects Update by Mrs. Carson.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'll share with you a few updates from the projects update memo. The bolded items are the new items from last month, and I'll just share some highlights from those new items. So the ACHD Integrated 5-Year Work Program, the public partner period is open right now for comments. So I did want to share, I just got the revised draft today about a couple hours ago. So I wanted to share that with you so I could highlight a couple of changes that were made there. So bear with me 1 second while I get that up for the Zoom. So the commission can make a choice. This is an action item to either submit comments to City Council to be submitted to ACHD, or you're welcome as citizens to submit comments privately as well. The link is in the packet for you to submit those comments privately. You can also send those to me to collect and send. There's several different ways to interact with that. I did want to share with you as a commission, though, a few of the changes in the top 20 items. I looked at the top 20 items from the commission and council that was put together of our city priorities and the changes that were made from the last integrated 5-year work plan to the most recent draft that was put out today. The items in red are items that were bumped out further. The items in blue are items that were moved forward. And then there are 2 items that were removed from the programming. The most notable, I would say, would be the Eagle and Overland improvements were removed from programming. Initially, they had been listed as 2025 for design and future for programming. And in the most recent update, they were removed from programming completely. There are some other changes you can see here. Again, I apologize that you didn't have time to review this. I just received it a couple hours ago from ACHD. I'll leave this up, let you all look at it for a minute, and then if there's any discussion on it.
And you're going to forward this to us by email, and it will have the colored changes we can use to follow the bouncing ball,
I can, yes, Mr. Chair.
please.
For this meeting, my request would be if the commission has any concerns with either the Eagle Overland project being removed or any of the other changes that you see here, please let's open a discussion about that so we can make a determination if the commission wants to send any comments to council to have an official city stance. So these are the changes for the roads and intersection projects. Locust Grove was slightly pushed out. Fairview, Locust Grove intersection, again, slightly pushed out by a couple of years. The Victory improvements were pushed out by a couple of years. Another Victory project pushed out by a couple of years, and then the 10-mile Cherry and Eagle Overland were removed from programming completely. So we don't know when those will be done. I would say at this point, Eagle and Overland is a high priority for the city from my perspective as a staff member.
Miranda? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the council comments on the previous version that you sent, and it looks like, I might be reading this wrong, but it looks like to me that 10-mile Cherry, that one is more of a priority. At least in the notes that from discussion in council, I think Councilmember Perot mentioned that in terms of priority.
That one, and then also there was some of the Victory projects, I believe, were in the council comments. So the Victory Locust Grove to Eagle one was in the comments from, I'm sorry, not from council, but from our Parks Department, as well as the Locust Grove project was in from our Parks Department. Yes.
David Ballard. Is the reasons or are there comments as to why those 2 items have been removed? Is there a basis for that?
Not at this point. I haven't had time to check back with ACHD to ask why they've been removed because we just received this. So I don't have a reason as to why they've been removed right now. I know that overall the changes were made because ACHD had some shortfalls in their budget and they needed to delay projects due to that. So they shifted several projects around. It looks like they moved a few things up, a few things down, took a few things out.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I try to stay quiet, but maybe a follow-up question for Miranda, if that's okay. Is these budgetary changes as a result to the Highway 16 extension and the requests that are being asked of the Highway District to fund connections? Do we know that?
To my understanding, their overall budget has less funds than they anticipated. So they did take into consideration that the Highway 16 project coming in will put more demand on the ACHD roadways, and looking at whether projects in the vicinity of those Highway 16 improvements need to be moved up in the programming. So that was something that played into their programming, but that wasn't something that was part of the initial conversation of why it was being revised. Initially, they determined it should be revised based on budgetary shortfall. And then later there was conversation about also upping projects around the Highway 16 expansion. Did that answer your question, Councilman J? Okay.
Remind me if Cherry Lane is going to actually intersect with 16, or is it just an over underpass? Do you know? Anybody remember?
I believe I have that if you,
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that one. So there's planned to be interchanges at Franklin, Eustick, and Chinden and State Highway 44, so not at Cherry or McMillan.
Okay, so that, in regard to the council member's question, that Highway 16 would not impact the Cherry 10-mile intersection work, since there's not going to be a connection to it. That answers,
not directly.
yeah, that answers my drill down question. The fact that they made moves both forward and backward, though, on several other projects, looks like they were doing more than just trying to find a way to save a buck or two. I mean, you know, they were shuffling things as well. So I think it appears they were doing more looking at the precedent of things or the order of things, possibly, than just budget concerns.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I seem to recall in the articles in the newspaper and such that the first draft of ACHD's budget included a whole bunch of foregone taxes. But then after council told them they couldn't take all the foregone they wanted to take, they had to scale things back. That's my recollection. I'm not sure if anybody else has that same recollection or not.
Well, having just put this in front of us, I'm not sure how much more discussion we can do without not having time to study it, look at it, and think about it. You were asking for comments on this right away. How quick do you need reaction once we have more than 5 minutes to look at it?
So you're welcome to send those to me, or you can comment directly through the ACHD process. The link to the map is there in the packet, and you can go into their map and comment on individual projects. If you have more overall comments, or you want to package all your comments into one email, I'm happy to send those as well to our partner at ACHD.
Okay, well, let's do
We
that.
have, I'm sorry, to answer your question though, we have until November 15th to submit comments.
Okay, so let's do that rather than spend time, if you're running late today anyway, discussing why or why not something was done when we have no idea. We have a subcommittee that exists for the purposes of this list. Do we not?
We do.
Mr. Chairman, I was actually just about to suggest perhaps the subcommittee meet in the next week or so to formulate some comments in a more concrete manner to send on to ACHD before that time limit ends.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
just as a reminder to that subcommittee, we do need to post any meeting 5 days in advance.
Mhm.
So as a committee, if you determine you want to meet, I need to know as soon as possible so I can get that posted through the clerk's office.
Absolutely.
Miranda, one other question. If we wish to get comments to ACHD by November 15, would we not have time to have a subcommittee meeting or two to come up with any recommendations they wish to make and bring it to our December Transportation Commission meeting in time for the entire commission to comment and then get those comments forwarded to ACHD in time?
Mr. Chair, let me look at ACHD's overall timeline, but I believe their public period closes on the 15th. Their partner outreach closes on November 15th, and they go to their work session on December 1st.
Oh, November 15th.
November
I'm
15th.
sorry, I misunderstood. I was further out than I should have been.
So if the subcommittee has comments to give to city council, I think I would have to look to our attorney to determine if the subcommittee can give comments to city council and ask them to submit an official letter, or would that need to come from the commission as a whole?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, who was that?
it's Commissioner Leclerc.
Yes, sir. Mr.
One action we could take is to ask them to extend that deadline. I mean, it seems like it's a lot of changes here that affect our city. And I think it would be good to provide some feedback on those. But I don't think we can have a subcommittee and a full commission and then have the council agree to what we say by the 15th. It's more like December 15th would be a better, if we could get an extension for 1 month to the 15th, maybe we could make that request of ACHD at this meeting, just so we have time to make some intelligent remarks about this. This is a pretty big deal. So that's just a thought. I don't know if staff thinks we could pursue that or not today. It's a question.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, you were saying? With that said, and with Mr. Leclerc's suggestion, what's the timing on all of this? You've got to get public notice for the subcommittee. You've got a council meeting to hit, et cetera, et cetera. Before we ask this commission if they wish to delegate their responsibility to the subcommittee, tell us how the timing works out on your scratch paper over there.
So it looks like the next council meeting, there's not one this week, so next week, and we wouldn't have time to get on their agenda. So we wouldn't be on a city council meeting agenda before the ACHD deadline anyways. So it may be worth concurrently delegating the communication to council, to the committee, based on an action of commission. And then also putting in a request to extend the deadline for that comment, allowing that subcommittee to meet. And then if they grant us the extension to comment, then we can submit comments to council and have them submit them to ACHD. The other option is just to, I don't want to use the word flood, but the other option is just to every comment as a group on, as citizens of the county, to comment on that, those changes that have been made. So that subcommittee could still meet and discuss it and bring back some comments to you next month. Even if we don't get the extension, we can still submit the comments before the public hearing at least. And then also as citizens submit comments. Did that answer your question? My suggestion would be to allow the subcommittee to meet and delegate them with the responsibility to go back to city council.
but they can't get to the city council in time to meet the deadline.
Not in time to meet the deadline. We could get to city council before the public hearing at least, and then submit a comment letter to go with the public hearing, which the public hearing is
Do you have
December
have
15th.
thought? Do you have a thought about it as a council opinion?
Opinion, as one council member, that I think pushing the deadline is likely not the best approach, but that the subcommittee could provide a letter to the council representing the committee's opinion, and I think including in that letter, because of timing, you weren't allowed to bring this back to the full commission, and rather than delay this response, the committee wanted to bring something forth. I think the council would be open to that. It is rare that this body so vehemently disagrees with some of the feedback from, your subcommittees that you form. Sometimes there's little things you want to tweak, but I believe in full faith that the committee can come forth with a synopsis or a summary of the opinion. And then, again, as commissioners, if you disagree with that particular piece, again, as an individual on the commission, you could send a follow-up correspondence or come to the public hearing.
Mr. Barrett, does that fit within the, okay. Okay, commissioners, what are your wishes? You can ask more questions if you wish, or come up with a proposal. How do we handle this?
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask Jared Smith a question. Mr. Smith, time-wise, what are your thoughts for convening, how quick, and information that you may need or you think the committee may need to consider? And just spitball a little bit about how quickly you can turn, and I'm in favor of delegating, but I was just kind of curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, so looking at the calendar now, the time we've met in the past has been on Wednesday. So the soonest, if we were to follow that time, would be meeting on the 10th. I would hope there might be, just due to the extraneous circumstances, we might be able to push that up. Still having to notice, I think the earliest we could legally do that would be on the 8th. So somewhere between the 8th and the 10th would likely be when we could meet. I would hope, since the earliest is the 8th, we could hopefully meet at that point to allow as much time for that, any opinion or anything we kind of come out with to circulate among the broader commission. So commissioners could be informed about whether they want to, submit an independent, comment to ACHD. That would be kind of the earliest we could do is the 8th. I would hope we might be able to swing something by the 8th. And then I would wager the latest would probably be the 10th.
Other commissioners, comments, thoughts? I am looking down there, Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Lancaster.
as I recall, I'm on this subcommittee with Mr. Smith, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Lewis, and I can't remember, and Commissioner Hopkins.
And Commissioner Hopkins.
All right. All my best friends. So very good. I'd be happy to take this on with our subcommittee and get something to city council. Willing to work with Commissioner Smith on this, and if that's what we want to do, I'm ready to take that on.
Other commissioners, thoughts? Okay, so it looks like we've, by consensus, agreed to have the subcommittee take this up in whatever legal notice, time, and ability to meet their calendars they can. Second question, I think, is that whether or not this commission wishes to authorize the subcommittee to go ahead and comment to the city council without waiting to bring it back before the full commission. What are your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard?
given the circumstances, and I'm trying to take into consideration Mr. Leclerc's comment, but it seems like there is a bit of a time constraint. And so the outline we have proposed is to have the committee meet, and I would be in favor of delegating that they, for lack of a better term, at least make an interim comment to the city to get us moving forward. And if we can preserve some time to formalize that, there's a little bit of fluid here or flexibility, so I think we get the ball running or ball started and keep this on our radar, see what comes out, and bring it up for our next one and make, if need be, finalize that or pass on any further recommendations or advice.
Okay, commissioners, Commissioner Ballard has proposed that we delegate extra level of authority to the subcommittee in this case because of certain situation. Thoughts, comments? Are you agreeable with it? We'll do it by consensus or not. I see 1, 2, 3 heads on one end of the table and 2 on the other and 4 on the other one side. Mr. Leclerc says it's okay with him.
Yep.
Ms. Carson, does that work? Does that give you answers and direction that we can do something with?
Yes, if we work quickly and we talk to each other, we should get something done in time to get it to the commission before, hopefully their work session, if not before their public hearing.
Okay. I hope somewhere in there someone thanks ACHD for at least telling us they're doing this. Okay.
Just as long as we're on this, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
what it looks like to me is the few things that got moved forward were design projects. Most of the real construction was put off. There's a lot to oppose here, and maybe the commission should just consider saying, we strongly object and disagree with these changes. And I think we could say that today. I don't know if everyone's ready to do that, but and we could say in a motion that, there will be more details on our objections later, but I just the first look at this looks terrible. I mean, it looks like all these major projects are being pushed out and some of them are dropped. So it's just real disappointing as an aside, but I guess I wonder if the rest of the commission thinks some action like that now would be appropriate yet, or should we wait for our subcommittee? Either way, I'm good.
As we've held this conversation, I'm reminded of some comments I've made over the last several years, whether or not an agency is nimble enough to pivot or turn. And then given the fluidity or the flexibility, there's some changed circumstances. On first blush, you go, I don't like that, or someone can say that doesn't look right. But I think if we gather some information, and we may come down and say, well, we don't like that call. But I would be in favor of at least doing a little bit of fact gathering before we call for a vote. I would just ask Mr. Smith and the subcommittee to study it and let some information percolate to the top.
The commissioner's thoughts on Mr. Leclerc's proposal.
Mr. Chair.
Wasn't sure who that was. Yes, sir. Mr. Lee.
I would agree with Mr. Ballard's point. I think that given how little information we have on the topic, I think it'd be more fitting to delegate it out to the subcommittee
I agree with Mr. Ballard and Mr. Leckey that I don't know enough about it to say anything about it other than I need time to study it. So I'm seeing nods in agreement with that on my right, and I think Tom, thank you very much. I think we won't fire off a shot in the dark here. We'll let the subcommittee get together and see what they come up with and be authorized, as we've stated, to send it forward to council should they wish to do so, and we will certainly see it at our December meeting and find out what's going on. This was not on the agenda as an action item, so there's really nothing for us to vote on here. But I think by consensus, we've got some direction, and I see Mrs. Carson was nodding
I have
affirmatively.
one more question for
One more question.
our legal counsel. If other commissioners want to send comments to that subcommittee, as long as there's not a discussion back and forth, they're just sending the comments, is that all right for the subcommittee to discuss those comments?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, if any commissioners have comments that they'd like given to the subcommittee, if you can send those to me, I can create that summary, make sure that they have those comments, and I will let the full commission know as soon as we have a date set for that subcommittee meeting, so you know your deadline to get those comments to that small group.
Okay, Mr. Smith, you got all that?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Carson, does that kind of get us through that slog?
Through the first item of the project updates memo.
Oh,
So I have a-
I can't wait for number 2. Would you please proceed?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
real quickly before we proceed, just the members of the subcommittee, just in the interest of time, I just want to mention I have already sent you an email. So if you could respond to that as quickly as possible, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carson.
All right. So the other items of the project update memo are mostly just updates, no real discussion points. Linder Road overpass, the RFQ for design is out. That is just for design. Construction is still not programmed. On page 8 of your packet, 10 Mile Road Victory to Overland project and the 10 Mile Victory Roundabout. The project is going through a redesign for one-way bike facilities behind the back of curb. The U-Stick 10 Mile to Linder project does have center medians now planned as part of that project. And the last thing I will update from the project memo is the Amity Locust Grove Road signal is back on the packet. That had been removed last month. It's back on now. ACHD determined that they were not going to go forward with an interim signal, and now they've decided that they are going to go forward with the ultimate configuration. So they are designing, the Amity Road, Locust Grove Road signal, and I have exciting news that we were told that that will include sidewalks or a pathway of some sort to the Mary McPherson Elementary School, which feels like a victory to me because I've been trying to get sidewalks there for about 7 years.
Good.
And that concludes the updates I have for the projects update memo. If there are any questions, I can take those.
Any questions of Ms. Carson? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Stephen Hunt, I believe you're still with us to give us the Valley Regional Transit Service update.
Mr. Chair, I believe Alyssa Taysom is doing that update, actually. We have...
Okay, Elisa, is that correct? You're going to do that for us?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and do that presentation for you today. And just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. So I'm just updating you today on our ridership for fiscal year 2021. We're going to be going over our fixed route ridership, the ridership on Harvest Transit, as well as the VA shuttle that launched earlier this year. For our existing and planned route services in Meridian, we have the 30 Pine, whose launch was delayed this October due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have the 40 Nampa Express and the 42 Happy Day Transit Center to Town Square Mall, which serve Meridian on 10 Mile and Overland. For specialized services in Meridian, we also offer the Harvest Transit Shuttle, the Meridian VA Shuttle, as well as Rise to Wellness. For fixed route services, for September, we were actually up 14% over the previous month, and routes 40 and 42 were up 23%. In September, there was a total of 3,227 boardings between the 40 and 42, and 20% of those boardings for the 40 and 42 occurred at Meridian stops. For the overall system in fiscal year 2021, we had just over 818,000 riders, whereas in fiscal year 2020, we had 1.1 million. But as you can see, looking at this trend line, we do seem to be leveling up. Out in the last 2 months, we have had increases in ridership over the previous month. So that is very encouraging. And we're continuing to monitor that ridership to determine the launch date of the Route 30. For Harvest Transit in September, there were 908 riders. And we actually do have an increase in riders this last fiscal year over the previous fiscal year. For FY 2021, there was 9,614 riders, whereas in FY 20, there was 9,262. So that is very encouraging. And then for the VA shuttle, it still is new. The route just started in May. We've had a total of 66 trips in May, and 14 of those trips occurred in September. There was a slight decrease from August to September, but it's a total of 4 trips. And with the newness of the route, we want to continue to monitor it for long-term growth. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Tyson?
May I ask one, Mr. Chairman?
You may, Mr. Ballard, please.
Jason, I get it that the COVID situation has depressed ridership. Long-term plans, it's not on part of your report, but bringing on new equipment. Have those plans been delayed? I know that that's not report, but that occurred to me.
Thank you very much. They haven't been delayed per se, as we are still planning on going forward with that. We did receive our 4 electric buses in August, and I believe we're expecting to have 9 more by the end of the year, possibly. They are currently being built. I believe one is being painted this week. So we are still planning on more electric buses for some replacements of the CNG and diesel buses. We are maybe slowing down a little bit on expansions, but as far as replacement of existing vehicles, those plans were already on the table before the pandemic hit, and we're continuing to move forward with those.
Thank you for taking the off-topic question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else with anything? Ms. Tyson, I have one question for you, please, regarding the VA shuttle.
Mhm.
What efforts are being made to make people that wish to make that trip aware that it's available?
I'm not really familiar with that myself. I believe it's just through the VA. We are going to be talking about ways that we can push it out through social media, et cetera, reaching out to those different groups. But that is a project that is primarily handled by operations, and so I have not been involved in those conversations, unfortunately.
I would think if they would either share it or do it for you, the VA should know who they are seeing out in Meridian. And somehow, some way, somebody might be able to tell Bill Smith that it's now in existence.
Mhm.
He may not have any interest in using it, but he might tell his friend Sam. So just a thought.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Taysom, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, I'm going to skip since the sergeant got called out for a moment. I don't know that he won't be back. We'll wait and see. Item 6 is Chinden access west of Highway 16. Mrs. Carson.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, on page 16 in your packet, you'll see the memo regarding Chinden access west of Highway 16. ITD has requested input from the city regarding where we would like to see access on Chinden as they work on that Chinden West project between Canada Road and Highway 16 in our Fields sub-area plan, as well as our comprehensive plan, as well as the City of Star comprehensive plan. There are collector roads at the half-mile mark. And so this memo is in and the conversation is put before you just to solicit some input so we can take a stance as a city on where we would like to see access for that. I will note also that just a brief note that the sub-area plan has not been adopted into the comprehensive plan yet, but as soon as that does happen, we'll bring that forward to you as well to review. But those two roads there that are in the mid-mile marks are part of the comprehensive plan in other sections as well. So we're looking for some
Exactly
action.
what is the ask?
Yeah, so looking for some action from Transportation Commission on what it's, as a group, your opinion would be for where to have access, whether it just be at the mile marks, being Canada Road, Star Road, and Highway 16 on Chinden, or whether we would also have an opinion to have access at those half-mile marks, and then something that we can take to City Council to kind of form an official city opinion on where we want those while we're getting improvements on Chinden.
And
So do you want access on Chinden at the 1 mile mark or the 1 mile mark and the half-mile mark?
Did I hear or read in here that the city of Star would like to see the half miles?
Yes, the City of Star does have in their comprehensive plan half-mile collectors, and they have requested half-mile collectors.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ballard.
Ms. Carson, looking at the diagram here or the map, at the half-mile lines, are there currently roads at those half-mile markers? And if there are roads, do those roads go through subdivision?
There are currently not roads. The Oahe Storm Avenue is being built or is slated to be built soon. The new collector road that's listed there between Canada and Star has not been built. Those are on future plans as well as on City of Star's future plans. This is the northernmost, this is the north boundary of the city here. So this is where we connect to Star. So Star also has roads that would connect to our planned collectors there. So no roads there yet, but they have been in our plans for a while.
My overall comment then would be, if it is a road that's going to be new across open land, if you will, that would be my suggestion. I'll disclose my own bias that trying to put an access road for an existing subdivision will cut through traffic. You solve the issue by planning on the front end. So generally, I would comment to build a new road where one doesn't exist.
So are you going so far as to say you would prefer to see the half mile as well as the mile?
Yes, because also the first responders prefer to have a half-mile access to assuming as that road is built, then it builds in behind.
Okay.
And so it allows, the half mile allows for access. Rather than driving a mile, you can drive a half mile to get where you need to be.
Okay. Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a few thoughts here that I can share on this topic, and I think I'm far enough removed from this one that I can comment generally at least. So if you'll indulge me for just a couple minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So my first thoughts, so I think most of you know my background is in traffic engineering, and so I think back to old college classes where they talk about access management and the two extremes, right? So we've got like freeways like I-84 where you can only get on at interchanges every other mile or more. And the other extreme is like the street that you live on with driveways on every house, right? And most roads are somewhere in between. So fewer accesses like I-84 makes them operate better, right? Faster, more vehicles. The other extreme is, all access, the residential street that you live on where it's more important to have access than speed and volume, right? So, so I think where does this fall in? And it's in between those two, certainly, but probably closer to freeway, right? This is a highway. This is US 2026, which goes from the Oregon coast to Boston, right? So we're talking about 2 miles in that highway that goes coast to coast. So with that background, I guess I don't have an answer for suggesting this, but I do have 2 places to look. So because it's a highway, so number of accesses and access spacing is governed by administrative code, by an IDAPA rule. And I, off the top of my head, don't remember what it would be for this highway. But I would suggest that number one, are any recommendations from this body be consistent with what administrative code says. Number two, I've been on this commission long enough to have heard a presentation from ITD when they were doing a corridor plan for Chinden. And I have to imagine that there's recommended access spacing in that corridor plan. And I would recommend that we not deviate from that plan. So we had opportunity to comment on that when the plan was being developed, and we did, right? So I think it would be not wise to comment differently now. So I don't have a specific suggestion. Again, I'm keeping my comments kind of general on this topic anyway, but I think that we need to check those 2 places and make sure that any recommendation we do make is consistent with administrative code, which is the application of state law, and then secondly with the specific corridor plan for this highway. So those are my recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Carson, do you know if there exists a written ITD policy on this particular corridor regarding accesses?
I do not know, Mr. Chair. I do know that for sake of consistency, I did look further east to see what's already been laid, and there are mid-block accesses in every block, in every square mile going to the east as well.
Mr. Chairman. So I think if you look at Chinden now, as Miranda correctly just pointed out, I think they've got half-mile accesses on Chinden headed that direction.
All the way to 16 from the east.
I don't know
Almost.
that, but I know from 10 Mile east, it's that way.
So they do have them. Some of them are, you can see on your map, and I should be sharing it with those of you on Zoom as well. They have accesses at every mid-mile. when I looked, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I looked, I believe there was accesses on every mile all the way to State Street. All the way into Boise. There's accesses at the half-mile mark.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I did a little research prior to the meeting. I think I can answer Commissioner Lancaster's questions. As far as the IDAPA rule goes, this is classified as a statewide route by ITD. And ITD, in the rules, they've got three different basic categories, rural, transitional, and urban. And the definition of rural is outside of anybody's area of impact or city limits. Transitional means you're in an area of impact, but not in a incorporated area, and of course, urban. The standards for this section for rural and transitional were traffic signals at the mile spacing and unsignalized at the half. But when you get into the urban classification, then it's signals at the half mile, which is what you see from actually, I was gonna say Black Cat eastward, but right, yeah, from that point eastward, you have half mile spacing. And in the corridor plan, which I believe is dated 2017, I pulled up those maps too, and they show signals from Highway 16 eastward every half a mile. And then westward, they show it still as rural, but we know that it's currently in the area of impact and it's going to be incorporated very shortly. So I think that half mile spacing of signalized intersections is consistent with how this area is growing.
Thank you. Other side of the aisle, you don't have to, but you're welcome. Mr. Chairman? A moment. Okay, yes, sir. Mr. Lewis, I was waiting for a conclusion there.
Oh, I didn't give you a conclusion? Are you going for a motion?
No, I heard what you were saying, and I go, okay, what's the punchline?
That half mile spacing is consistent for an urban area. Half mile spacing of signalized intersections is appropriate. Oh, I did look at that. Yeah, the plan that I saw from 2017 showed from Highway 16 eastward half mile signals. But westward from 16, they have mile spacing and they have raised median in there. But it says, in fact, I printed it out here. It says US 2026 will be a divided roadway to restrict full movement access to signalized intersections. So the key is, where will the signalized intersections be? And back when the corridor plan was done, that was all considered rural and transitional. So they didn't put anything at the mid-mile. But I think it is appropriate as it develops and is incorporated by the city to get half mile spacing for traffic signals.
Thank you. What are your wishes? You have a question before you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the commission take the position that half mile access is appropriate.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lewis.
Second by Mr. Hopkins.
Mr. Lewis, I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. I was talking about half mile where there's no development as opposed to a half mile.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The example is there was a street at the half mile that goes through a current subdivision. And you go, okay, we'll call that the half mile road, and then we want to signalize that. Does that bring more traffic through that subdivision?
Oh, yeah, it would. So we would plan for that. that mid-mile road to be a collector road that doesn't bisect a subdivision. That's right.
And that was
I agree with you. Got it. What? Is the,
I'm confused. I thought the two of you were in agreement.
No, he says the suggestion to say, let's put it, our recommendation is at the half-mile marker, and I'm saying, as long as those are designated collectors.
That's consistent with what I was, with what I intended. So I could amend my motion to say that the mid-mile intersection should be collector streets. Would that,
I appreciate clarification.
And just a second there.
Yes.
Miranda, if that turns out to be the case, is that
That is what I need. I just.
is that an
just needed an
answer that
opinion from
works?
Yep, that answer works. I was just looking for an opinion from the commission on what you wanted, and it sounds like I have a consensus.
Further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just comment that trusting Commissioner Lewis, as I do, and on his report of his findings. So that's exactly what I was wanting to know or looking for in my comment earlier. And so to me, the motion sounds consistent with the plan and the law. So that's all I can ask for.
Any other discussion? I'd like to commend Commissioner Lewis on his homework. Unassigned, but assumed. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Ms. Carson, did you have what you need?
I have what I need. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Okay, next item on the agenda is the staff communications item by Mrs. Carson.
Right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I will just highlight a few staff communications that came in. We discussed the Compass Charter School issue at length last month, but I did want to provide a brief update that ACHD has now said that they do not plan to add that left turn lane until it comes through with the programmed changes on Black Cat. So initially, they had said that they would add a left-hand turn lane southbound to help with that traffic congestion. They have since updated that they will wait to add that until the Black Cat improvements are done, and that is not programmed in the most recent draft that we received.
They had told us at the last meeting that they were either into or going into design to do that. Now they're saying, no, we're not.
Correct. On page 19, there was brief discussion. I don't know that this isn't a pressing issue, but just something to plant a seed. The chair and I had discussed this month. Transportation improvements that are being done as part of a development are not necessarily in these updates that I give you from ACHD. They're not in the ACHD construction list. So when you see construction projects going on out there that are not done directly by ACHD, they're done through developments. There's not necessarily a running list for that. So there was some discussion on whether the development review subcommittee could maintain some kind of list of that sort. I'm not sure if that's something that we need to plant as a seed and make a decision on, or if that's something you want to think about, make a decision tonight. That's up to the chair.
I brought this up with Miranda because I mentioned an intersection or two to her, and her answer was, well, those are not ACHD. I believe a commissioner several months back asked that Black Cat and either Macmillan or used to be added to our projects report, and it was. And I now wonder whether or not that one was an ACHD or a product of development by the new school. I would like for us to see any type of in-roadway activity reported to us. I don't know why it would be excluded from our ability to comment on it.
Well, the comment is done when the development application goes through. So when a development comes to council and goes to ACHD, that's when those decisions are made, and that's when comments would need to be made. So that would be something that would need to be done during the development review process. Once the once the development application is accepted by, or approved by council and ACHD, at that point, the period for comment is no longer open.
Maybe not, maybe I misspoke saying comment. I think we ought to be told about it and not just come across it in our neighborhood and wonder what's going on.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Seems to me that that was our ask a year ago when we created the subcommittees, and in particular on the development subcommittee, that we weren't asking to vote yea or nay on plans, because there's another commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, that yet we were asking to be able to review those. It seems to me that that's consistent with, or today's question is consistent with what we asked to do a year ago by having those plans come before us. Our experience, borrowing from Mr. Lancaster, I think I can say that I've got a little bit of gray beard here, that some of the issues that we see should be addressed on the front end rather than the back end. So I'm thinking that that is consistent with what we asked, to be able to see some of those development plans vis-a-vis traffic and make a comment.
I guess I'm a little confused, Ms. Carson. The intersections around Oahe School out on the west side of town exist. They are ACHD intersections. If they're being changed, modified, expanded, contracted, or whatever, because of a development, I don't see how that could take them away from ACHD. It's still their intersection.
Mr. Chair, ACHD doesn't do the construction. They
That is a
condition
technicality to me as to who's got the shovel.
Right, but ACHD doesn't put out any updates on the construction because they're not doing the construction. They condition a developer, in this case, the developer was the school. They condition a developer to do that construction. They go out for an RFP, bring in contractors, they do the construction. ACHD doesn't put out any kind of update of what's happening on those.
So the problem is our ability to get knowledge, because you're reporting to us of projects is done from an ACHD product that comes out automatically every month, I'm guessing.
The updates do come from weekly construction updates and ACHD project-specific web pages that are then compiled into the projects update memo. None of those sources come from developers themselves.
I appreciate the work it takes to create those for us and pull them together. Thank you very much. But I still feel that somebody's out there making a change in an ACHD street in the city of Meridian, we should be minimally advised of it.
And that advisement, Mr. Chair, does happen when the development application comes through. That's when those applications would be reviewed, and you'd see before it's approved what conditions, so what traffic improvements have been conditioned by council or by ACHD to the developer, what the developer is conditioned to do before they're approved.
But those are done outside this commission. Those are done by staff, possibly P&Z and the council. And we are not privy to them. I get all of the development applications that come through the city public information system automatically because I've asked to be on the list, but I don't know if any other commissioners do. And those applications, when I see them, are so early that they don't talk about whether or not the corner of walk and don't walk's got to have this done to it. That happens later during the process, and even though I'm certain it's public information, I don't get it automatically, and I don't particularly want to be responsible for going out and looking for it all the time. I guess my question is, why can't we be told about these privately constructed development caused street changes in Meridian? Council member.
Mr. Chairman, and maybe I want to make sure that I'm hearing, I think what your request is, which is essentially any roadway improvement that's existing in Meridian, whether it's developer initiated or highway district initiated, you're asking for this body to be informed when those changes are going to take place? Is that the crux of what you're looking for?
Could not have said it better.
Okay. And what I think what I'm hearing is, you know, when ACHD moves forth on a project, they're doing, I think, a good job of communicating that out. But development-led projects, whether it's we're just adding a sidewalk or we're building out all these streets, you're seeing that layout when a plat is approved, when an annexation is approved, but you're wanting to have a little bit more detail about, we're going to put a crosswalk here, or there's going to be a stop sign or a speed bump or something placed. It's a little bit more detail to what's actual before construction begins. Is that?
If that information is available, I'm not trying to change what's being done on that side of the door. I'm trying to get us informed about it. Even though ACHD is not reporting it through their systems, the staff and city staff knows about it.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond to that, I don't think it, and again, I don't want to speak for Miranda because she's the GOAT, but greatest of all time, just making sure that we're clarifying on that. I don't want to besmirch Miranda. But I think oftentimes, sometimes it's the case that the highway district maybe hasn't communicated that out to us. I think that there is real buy-in from Miranda and from the planning staff to make sure that you guys have as much information as possible. And I've been texting a little bit while I've been listening to the conversation to see if we can help source some of this out. It just might be the case that you're right, that that information is likely being reported someplace, but isn't being maybe transmitted in a predictable manner to us so that we can get it onto you. So we can, as a council liaison, I can work with the mayor to try and see if we can help eliminate some of those hurdles and make it a little more streamlined for you to get both timely and accurate information.
I would appreciate it unless the commissioner says we don't care and don't do it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as Commissioner Leclerc, we looked at those development agreements and I just want to reiterate, I think you're right. We need to be more in the loop, but we don't want to duplicate anything that P&Z is doing. But what will happen is these applications will go through, there'll be public comments, and maybe a turn lane or a sidewalk is added, and we never know about it. And so I think when those applications are approved, if staff can see that, oh, here, wait, they put this extra condition in, that says there's this crosswalk, or they're going to signalize a light, or they're going to put in a turn lane, we really should know about that. Let's report that to the Transportation Commission. Not so much that we're going to change what the developer's doing, but that we can react to a change in the landscape in that neighborhood. We may have a sidewalk that goes nowhere, that may become a project for ACHD later to connect the sidewalk to the next segment of sidewalk that exists. And sometimes we want to do that whether there's development or not. And so there might be a trail to a park that makes sense after the fact that the development is built. We've all seen these well-planned development projects, or even ACHD projects, that come in and then everyone's frustrated. Traffic's worse than we thought. The South Y comes to mind. But anyway, I think that's a great idea. I think we should be notified when a final plat is approved, when a final series of development agreements are put in place, and then it helps us with our future planning when we know what's going to be built when that developer starts turning dirt. So that's a great idea, Mr. Chairman. I think we should be vigilant and get that information if we can.
Tyler, you had something?
Well, yes, again, I'll go back to a year ago when we created our ask for more information. And the one caveat was that the information given to this commission is not a condition of development, because we were not going to insert ourselves as another layer in that process. Meaning, again, we're an advisory committee. We don't make a decision. So my concern, if trying to strain this through Mike, is that if we're asking to put another layer there, that this commission has the ability to stop a project as opposed to simply make a recommendation. I don't know how far into the weeds we go. But overall, like I said, we've looked at some problems after conditions after the fact, and made some recommendations. I'd have to think about what the ask is and what the reflection is. Are you just creating another right of appeal for a developer if the ask is for doing something beyond an advisory capacity?
Haven't suggested anything beyond an advisory capacity. Just don't understand the difference between ACHD redoing an intersection and a developer redoing an intersection as far as this commission is concerned.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
if I may, I'm a little bit confused still, because when the commission met a year ago and discussed the roles of the subcommittees, one of the roles for the development application subcommittee was to review and provide feedback to the planning department. And it sounds like that's being flipped on its head a little bit. And now we're looking for the planning department to review and compile that list and then provide it to the Transportation Commission.
The development application subcommittee is not being informed on development applications, so they can review them.
Okay, so in that case, is it
When I read what you've put on the screen, it calls for the development application subcommittee to review and provide feedback on development applications. Granted, Commissioner Ballard, without slowing down the process, et cetera. But they're not being told about them.
so
They can't even be aware that that's happening there, so we can then consider what's going to happen in the next mile down the road.
So it may be a conversation to have with the subcommittee to meet and discuss to start how to review those applications, how they come through with the transmittals, what the next steps are, where to find the findings, how to read the findings, so that that's something that group is a little bit more empowered to find the information that you're looking for.
To be informed. The council member said it very well. To be informed is what I'm talking about getting. Like I say, I read the development applications when they come in the door, and I've only seen out of 100, 2 questions I pushed back to Caleb saying, what are they going to do about the corner walk and don't walk or something? Because they don't have that level of information
At the beginning of the
those
process.
come in.
Right.
Saying there's going to be a 297 apartment complex on this corner. It doesn't say, and the intersection will be rebuilt thus. It doesn't go that far because it isn't known yet. It hadn't gotten that far. And it's very hard for myself, the commissioners, the subcommittee, to take that development application and crystal ball what they might do with that intersection a year or 2 down the road.
Understand.
Well,
My
unless
suggestion.
the commissioners have something else, Miranda and I will talk about this further.
My suggestion, Mr. Chair, if I may, would be to have this group meet, and I can do a tutorial of sorts on how to find that information with applications that have already gone through the process, so that we can kind of see what the role would be and who falls where in that role, and those kinds of things, to make sure that that review process is happening at the level that the commission wants it to happen at.
Okay, thank you. One final comment. When I first started getting development applications, Caleb sent me, I think, 14 of them that were well through the process. And I read them, and I read the comments by the various and sundry agencies that have the ability to comment. Fire, police, DEQ, health department, this one, that one, the other one. And my comment back to Caleb was, y'all do a really good job. I didn't see anything jump out in any of those that said, wow, if we had been involved, we would have kept that from happening or fixed that or something. Again, it's more of an ask to be informed than it is an ask to impact. Okay, thank you. Do you have anything else on the
No.
staff? Okay. The last item on the agenda, the sergeant has not been able to return, so we're not going to hear anything from the police department today, apparently. Last item is the January meeting date. There, when
Mr.
Mayor
Chair.
and I and Miranda met last week, there was some confusion about when the January first holiday would be observed and what impact that would have on this commission. And I'll imagine you have a plan.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one question real quick. I do want to call your attention to page 36 of the staff communications. I'm sorry to go back to an item, but I do just want to call your attention to page 36. If you have any comments on the auxiliary lane being added to I-84, I would suggest that you submit those comments to myself or to Tony Tisdale so that we can make sure that any input from the commission is weighed in that decision to add that item to the tip.
You have a time frame you want that?
Looks like she's got, the deadline is November 9th for Compass to receive those comments.
Thank you, Miranda.
Yes.
Okay, commissioners noted, page 36, got an item to take a look at and comment on if you wish.
And Ms. Tisdale has something to add, I think.
No, I was just saying thank you. Thanks for pointing that out.
All right, and then the January meeting date, sorry to jump back to that item, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
January, the first Monday is January 3rd. That is not the technical, or I guess legal holiday. The legal holiday for New Year's is observed on the Friday preceding because New Year's is on a Saturday. However, we wanted to be sure that we were being respectful of your time with your family over the holidays and wanted to check in on whether we would have a quorum on January 3rd, or if we needed to push that meeting either a week or cancel it or hold it on the 3rd. So just looking from input from the commissioners. We value your time as volunteers and just want to make sure we're respecting your holiday.
Commissioners, you have a question? Are you in a position to talk about it today? Would you rather have some time to talk about it and find out what your family's plans are around that first? We've got time to get this worked out, but it's a legitimate question that staff is giving us the opportunity to decide on. So, thoughts at the moment?
Check my
Well,
calendar,
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
fine.
this is Commissioner Leclerc. When I looked at the calendar, I thought, well,
Tom, one moment.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, no.
I can't really hear all the others, so.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I was just gonna say, I checked my calendar and I'm fine.
To meet on the 3rd? Everybody, Ballard, do you know? Okay, I've got 4, 5, 6 okay on the 3rds in the council chambers. Tom Leclerc.
Oh, well, doesn't matter now. When I looked at that, I thought, well, that's kind of a short week for staff. And I thought, well, maybe it'd be better for us to meet on the 10th instead of the 3rd. To give staff an extra week of preparation and have maybe other reports materialize in that first week. And we might have more to do on the 10th than on the 3rd. But I'm available on the 3rd. I can certainly do that, but we might hear from staff and see what they think if there's a preference.
Thoughts, Mrs. Carson?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Leclerc, I appreciate that. For me, I'm available on the 3rd or the 10th.
Okay.
And prep
6
time-
one way, half a dozen
Prep
another.
time's not a problem?
Prep time's not
Okay.
a problem, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then I believe they've made a decision that meeting on the 3rd.
We're good on the
is
3rd.
plan.
So, Mr. Chairman, just as a note, I think we do have some work we could do with Miranda. I think let's just for now pencil a meeting for the Development Review Ordinance Review Committee for December 6th at 2:30 p.m. prior to our meeting, and we'll get some information from Miranda about these development agreements and what we can do to be able to retrieve data from them that's useful to the commission. So that's a good work item for us, and so want to let our subcommittee know we could meet on the 6th. Thanks.
That works for me.
That's
So,
all I have.
Miranda, will you see how that works out in your life and let us know?
Yeah, pencil.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, future meeting topics. Miranda's already commented that number 11, the field sub-area plan, will be brought to us at a future meeting as it's coming together. I pointed out to her that we had not, to my knowledge, heard that anytime recently, and probably a review of it would be good. So that will be coming in the future. The field trip in 2022 is actually a question. Again, it's not necessary that we have a decision today, but if you have any thoughts about whether you would like to take a trip somewhere in 22,
Disneyland,
we can do
Mr.
it.
Chairman.
Pardon?
Disneyland, Mr. Chairman.
Disneyland. I think Disneyland's out of the city of Meridian, to my knowledge. Although the council member may disagree at some point. Hey, they're both entertaining. What can I tell you?
Mr. Chairman, can I
Mr. Ballard?
get a question? And this comes from, I sit on the Government Affairs Committee for the Meridian Chamber of Commerce. But I was asked, or I volunteered to look at how street cleaning gets scheduled.
is that part of a field trip question?
No, I think Disneyland's a great one. Matter of fact, in March, I'm thinking about going to Orlando. On another matter, and I could do a twofer. But
Give us a moment on the street cleaning and let us see if we have any opinion on it.
oh,
Or you can be thinking about it and thinking about not only if you want to, but what it might be. We don't, to my knowledge, have any real strong thoughts about it either way.
Mr. Chair, I have had one suggestion come up since you and I last spoke, to have the city, or to have the commission ride the new Route 30 at some point before it launches, to hopefully get an electric bus. It would depend on the timing of the day that we were able to schedule it, but to have if that's something the commission would be interested in doing.
As long as it's an electric bus. Okay, street cleaning.
okay, I jumped ahead. The question that I was asked is, how does that get scheduled, and is that a topic that we want to take a look at?
Council members, Councilman Ballard's posed the question, do we wish to get into street cleaning? Wait a minute, he didn't exactly say that. No brooms and shovels, but do we want to get into learning how that operates, what the system and the plan is, and so forth?
Mr. Chairman, sure.
Couple of yeses. I saw a head nod and I heard a yes, and another head nod. Miranda, is that something that we could look toward at a future meeting?
Mr. Chair, is that for a future meeting topic or a field trip idea, to be clear? Okay, a future meeting topic.
Future meeting topic.
Yes,
not a
Mr.
field
Chair, I can look into that.
I've been on, when on the city council, I've been on field trips with brooms and shovels, and that's public service at its best. Wear gloves, trust me. We will get that in on a future meeting, sir.
All right,
I think it'd be interesting to learn how it works,
okay.
or whether or not it works.
Just carrying out my assignment. I was a little dilatory, but now I've got it before the commission, and I appreciate it, and getting that on a meeting topic.
You're a good man. That concludes our agenda. Anything else for the good of the order? We're going to get out of here on time in spite of our late start. Thank you, sir. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ballard seconded. Mr. Lewis made the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you all.